Hey, welcome back once again, Knicks fans. I wanted to do a quick video about Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. This is basically talking about how and why the Utah Jazz decided to break up this team, and how this opportunity came up for the New York Knicks, right? And so it's going to give us an idea of what to expect with this kind of player if the Knicks are able to land Donovan Mitchell. And it gives us an idea like what to expect, right? And what it means for the team going forward. And so, without further ado, we're going to get into it. Please like, subscribe, comment below. I'll be more than happy to respond to your comments. I would love to have more engagement. And please subscribe. I really appreciate it. It really gives me the encouragement and gives me all I need to basically keep doing more videos. So this one here is going to be a little a little bit about some statistics. Like we're just taking, and pretty much what we're doing here is we're taking the net rating for Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. We're comparing it to the team's overall performance to see if how their performance impacts the team's performance, right? And so that's what we're doing here. And so with Donovan Mitchell, as you see here, you can see the dots are going up from the bottom left up to the right. And essentially what we have here is I think the net rating, his net rating is on the x-axis, and the team's margin of victory is on the y-axis. And so if you see here, when you plot them all together, and so that's pretty, what I'm plotting are these here, right? It's basically, this is the net rating and the margin of victory. And so if you kind of go to a graph and go to 64, right? So here you go to 61. Net rating was 64. Oh, I'm sorry, that was Rudy Gobert. Donovan Mitchell, you go he had a net rating that was 17 and margin of victory was 21. So you basically go to see if you can find a net rating where it was 17 and the margin of victory was like 21. And so you kind of plot it together. So it's one of these points up there, right? So that's pretty much all it is, just some basic stuff right here, right? So that's how this is all done here. So when you plot it all out, it kind of tells you what's happening between his performance and how his performance impacts the team's margin of victory, how well the team does overall. And also there's a correlation statistic that's down here that we can use that as the score to kind of see how strong that relationship is. And so his is 0.729, let's call it 0.73, right? Rudy Gobert's, his stats fell off. But it was like around, I think it was like 0.4, between 0.4 and 0.42. And you can see the difference between Rudy Gobert and like Donovan Mitchell. So with Donovan Mitchell, if you drew a straight line through the middle from the bottom left to the top right, and you kind of looked at the distance between the dots and that line, it would be basically, it would be the distance will be small, right? It wouldn't be too large, right? But if you look at Rudy Gobert, because he's got like dots, like sort of like in all these different quadrants, like kind of far apart. So if you draw a line from bottom left to the top right, and you looked at the distance will be higher, will be higher than the distance between the line and the dots for Donovan Mitchell. And so that's why Donovan's correlation statistic is much higher than Rudy Gobert's is. And so basically it shows Rudy Gobert his performance. When you look at the statistics, his performance basically doesn't have a huge impact on the team's overall performance. And the thing that's really interesting, that this is where it gets really interesting, because when you add both of their performance together, the score here goes down, right? So this score here is 0.716, which is lower than Donovan Mitchell's alone. And so when you combine both of their performance together, it should be higher than Donovan Mitchell's. It should be, in my opinion, I think it should be maybe 0.77 or 0.80. That means basically with both of them combined, they actually are a net benefit to the team when they're both playing together, and that both of them together have a bigger impact on the team's performance when they're in the floor together. And so more positive impact, a better, stronger and more positive impact on the team's performance. But as you see here, when you put both of their performances together, they're 0.716, which is lower than Donovan Mitchell's alone. And so this kind of proves, in my opinion, this proves that basically they just didn't play well together, and they just don't mix what they don't match well together. They don't mix well together on the floor, and these stats here essentially proves it. And that's the reason why they decided to trade Rudy Gobert and try to blow it up. You know, but the thing that it makes you wonder is like when you have a player like Donovan Mitchell that can have this kind of impact on the team, right, as an individual. Why would you get rid of a player like that? You shouldn't. You should try to build around that player. Maybe get other playmakers to help him out, right? So that like when it comes into the playoffs, it's not so easy to stop the Utah Jazz. And so that's the real problem, right, with the Utah Jazz, because they only have their offense is not balanced well enough. So you have only this one playmaker, which is Donovan Mitchell. And that's the reason why his performance is so highly, the team's performance is so highly dependent on his own performance. And that's why the score is so high. Normally on a good teams, basically on the really good teams, like even the number one option, the correlation statistics will not be 0.72, 0.73, anywhere that's high. Like you look at Giannis, his is like in the 0.5s. And the reason why his is 0.5 because they have a very good, well-balanced team that's built around Giannis. And also Giannis is also like make plays for his teammates, right? And so he doesn't always have to he doesn't always have to basically score a lot of points for his team to win a lot because he's a great, really good playmaker. Yeah, there's a lot of games where Giannis with the Bucks where Giannis will score like only like 15 points and they blew out the team by like 35. And so if you look at that, the net rating for Giannis is always going to be smaller sometimes, especially when you look at like the blowout wins that they have. His net ratings are not going to be as high as like it's not going to be really that high in some of those games. And so, but that's usually the mark of really good teams when you have like an MVP candidate like Giannis is on that team. Yet the correlation statistic for basically his performance versus the team's performance is like low. It's like around 0.55 or whatever. Again, that just shows the mark of a good team. So the bad teams, like well, not bad teams, but the teams where they're too dependent on one player, Donovan Mitchell, they get bounced really early. And you can tell because the correlation statistics for him, his performance versus the team performance, 0.73. Another person is Nikola Jokic. He's notorious for it. His correlation statistic is always insane. I think and he gets bounced pretty early in the playoffs as well. So he's a very talented player. However, the team is just way too dependent on him. And so when they get into the playoffs, all you got to do is basically muffle him a little bit. And as he goes, the team goes essentially, right? And so I'm trying to think of another player. The only other player that I'm sure there are other players with high correlation statistics. Basically, think of any team that kind of have a one-man show, right? They do well in the regular season, but then they get bounced early in the playoffs. Normally, if you look at those kinds of teams, there's going to be that one player. Their performance, the relationship between their performance and the team's performance is going to be really high. A couple of years ago, we had that with Julius Randle. His correlation statistics on when he was on the Knicks for his performance versus the team was like 0.72, 0.73. So in that range a couple of years ago. And we got bounced. We basically got a gentleman's sweep, in the first round of the playoffs. It was not very difficult to stop our offense because it was just a one man. It was just Julius, right? Everything was basically, he was the engine a couple of years ago for the New York Knicks, right? However, Donovan Mitchell has proven over the long course that like this is not a fluke. So it's not like the correlation statistics is only high for like one season. It's like this for him like every season. Julius Randle, it was only that high for that one season, right? This past season we played, his correlation statistics was just really low. There was no impact. He didn't have an impact on the team's performance at all. His performance was like too erratic for there to be like a relationship between there, right? Between his performance and the team's overall performance. And so the team struggled, right? As well, because we were looking for him to be the engine, to be that man again, and he just wasn't this year. But however, going back to Donovan Mitchell, like how do you give up on a player like that, right? You don't want to, especially at 25 years old. And so what it makes me think is, I think Donovan Mitchell actually requested a trade. And so I think that's what happened. He requested a trade. And, maybe they said like, look, we'll trade Rudy Gobert. And if we, would you consider staying? We're going to trade him. and we're going to prove to you. They proved to him that they were going to trade him, and they did that. And I think they probably had a conversation with him, and he just didn't want to say it. And then also on top of that, Quinn Snyder left as well. So I think basically the reason why he's also leaving, he requested that trade. He just didn't want to be there anymore, and he just wanted out. So I wanted to take another look at, just to show. I wanted to take a look at another team that that have sort of like a big three, like a big three or even a big two, to see like how when you stack their performances together, it increases the correlation. Basically the correlation between it increases the relationship between their performance and the team's overall performance. So the Celtics, 2007, 2008 Celtics was a team I wanted to use, mostly because they signify, basically the current era of the Big Three basketball, that everyone, all the teams seem to be chasing. I don't know. It looks like maybe they've kind of given up on it because putting together a Big Three is extremely difficult, right? It's less difficult than putting together a good team, but however, putting together a Big Three is also really difficult. It might be the same, right? Because a lot of times people just basically end up chasing big threes, like the three best players they can find to put together. But they have to fit together because if you got to look at basically even like think about Brooklyn Nets, what happened there, it didn't work out. And remember, like even a few years ago when you had Russell Westbrook, was Harden, and even like it didn't work out the way they thought it would, right? And so, but the we're gonna look at the Celtics, 2007, 2008 Celtics, because these were really interesting. It was actually a very well put together big three. And so if you look at the first thing you notice, so basically we're looking at Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and Kevin Garnett. And right off the bat, you look at the scores. Paul Pierce set .74, Ray Allen .52, and Kevin Garnett was also .52. So right off the bat, you realize that Paul Pierce was actually the engine for this for the Celtics team and offense, right? Because his correlation, the relationship between his performance and the team's performance was so high, right? And so that's one thing I realized. However, when you combine all three of them together, the correlation, the relationship between their performance and the team's performance, like that score goes way up to .87, which is good, which is pretty good. That's not bad, right? And the thing that was really interesting, if you looked at Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett individually, these statistics suggest that they're just not needle movers, right? They're not good enough to move the needle on their own. But when you combine their stat together, right, the performances together, the correlation statistic, the relationship between their performance combined and the team's performance, like jumped to .70. I'm talking about Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett combined, right? He didn't make it on the slide, unfortunately, but it didn't make it on the slide. However, it was, it was definitely worth. And so the thing is, like now, you want to compare. It's curious to see, like these stats that we have on this paper. How is it like how does it translate to like what I'm seeing on what we see on the floor? And so with the Celtics is like you can tell it was a well put together team because Paul Pierce could score on all three levels, right? So he can operate from outside in, he can shoot the three, shoot the mid range, break down the defense, and make play for others. He can always kick it back out to like if he collapses the defense, he can kick it out to Ray Allen for a three or kick it out to Garnett for like a mid range. And so he can do that, right? And then you had Ray Allen, who was the spot-up shooter. Everyone else can break down the defense, and he's just sitting in the corner, just waiting to take that three. And he did pretty well at that. Kevin Garnett, him and Paul Pierce had the higher usage rate than Ray Allen. So both of them were basically the playmakers for themselves and the team. And so with Kevin Garnett, he was able to operate in a paint high post, and he can create for others, collapse the defense, and kick it out to Ray Allen or Paul Pierce for a three. So he did everything for the team around the rim on the offense and on the defense, plus the mid range game, right? And so it's just a really good team. It just really worked well, and you can just see it, and you could just tell it worked well when you look at the statistics, right? And if you look here, look at how tight that is. If you drew a line from the bottom left straight to the top right, look at the distance between these points and the line for these three guys combined. It's just so narrow, right? So it shows you like how strong of a relationship their performance was with the team's performance, right? And so if you kind of go back and then think about Donovan Mitchell, which is basically they're the subject, who we're talking about, right? And so that pretty much, means that obviously, like I said before, they didn't fit well on the team together. You kind of wonder Donovan Mitchell, how well did he do in the pick and rolls with like Rudy Gobert? Did they do enough pick and rolls with Rudy Gobert? But then on the flip side too is like Rudy Gobert, you can tell he just didn't have any offensive game, right? He didn't have anything to contribute to the team on his own offensively, right? He did get some offensive rebounds and get some second chance points. Was able to get to the line quite a bit. However, he just didn't have any offensive game, so he couldn't really create for himself or for his team members as well. And so that was really the big difference, right? And so the interesting thing, like I said, is like because of correlation statistics that Donovan Mitchell was showing, I looked at his usage rate, and of course the usage rate was really high. And we look at basically the usage rate for the New York Knicks, right? For our top guns from last year, R.J. Barrett and Julius Randle. Both of them were high 20s, right? Quite a bit, quite often last season, you would get Julius Randle. His usage rate could be above 30 sometimes, quite a bit. And once in a while, RJ will be above 32. And so it just makes you really wonder, right? So somebody's going to have to take a big back seat. Well, first of all, we got Brunson already. So somebody's going to have to take a back seat because Jalen Brunson is going to have the ball in his hands, right? And so both of those guys are going to have to probably take a back seat unless like RJ Barrett takes a huge leap or if Julius Randle takes a huge leap, right? And but if we get Donovan Mitchell on his team, I mean, like you can't have like all these players with like high usage rates, right? That need the ball to play well, right? And so what I foresee is like I kind of do see the Julius Randle trade possibly happening. Well, at least I see it making sense, right? He's a high usage player, and he's kind of like a point forward. I think that's how he likes to play. He likes the ball in his hands, and because I've seen a lot of times last year where you would create basically Emmanuel quickly as somebody create create basically get him a wide open shot. He'll basically not take the wide open shot. He'll just start dribbling and dribble right into traffic or dribble into the lane, into a crowded lane. And so it's going to be really interesting to see, is he going to be able to, like, even if they get Donovan Mitchell, is he going to be able to take a step back and operate more like Obi, right? So like with this team they're trying to build, if they get Donovan Mitchell, it just feels like Obi just fits the team a whole lot better. He's low usage. When he gets the ball, he's making quick decisions. He's either going to shoot, attack the basket right away. And when he attacks the basket, if he doesn't want to shoot it, he basically makes the defense move and then he kicks it out and passes it off to someone else, right? And so a unique player, that's what you need, right? Either Julius Randle would have to play like that, or the chances are I think they're probably going to consider moving him and then have Obi take that starting power forward role. So that's essentially what I wanted to talk about. Wanted to talk about exactly why the Utah Jazz actually decided to blow this up, number one. And we've established that they just, statistically, you can prove that they were just not a good team with both of them on the floor together. And then number two, because of basically what the stats suggest about Donovan Mitchell, if Mitchell comes to the New York Knicks, I think a trade, Julius Randle trade does make sense. I think it makes sense. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it makes sense because you need someone who's a low usage player who can make, very quick decisions and who's not going to hold on to the basketball, especially at the power forward position. Everyone else will have to take a step back because now you're going to have two guards that are ball dominant, right? That need the ball in their hands. RJ Barrett, they're probably going to give him leeway to create a little bit, but I don't think they're going to allow him to create unless he takes a huge step forward and becomes a much more efficient player, especially a efficient finisher at the basket. I don't see him having the ball in his hand the way he did last year as well. So he's going to probably go back to the role of being more of like being able to, once he gets the ball, shoot. But he's got to make quick decisions too. He needs to be a lot more like Obi in terms of the quick decisions once he gets the ball, instead of getting the ball and like, okay, now I need to create for my team. No, these guards are going to be creating for you, and you need to basically either pass or shoot at this point, or attack the basket right away. And so that's pretty much what I have, guys. Let me know what you think. Please like and subscribe and comment below. I really appreciate the engagement. Again, please like and subscribe. and I'll be more in comment below. I'll be more than happy to respond to you guys. Thank you. Have a good night.